Happy morning to you all. Blue Stars Higher Secondary School welcomes you all to learn this wonderful poem, The Hollow Crown, which was written by William Shakespeare. This poem, this is an extract from William Shakespeare's historic play, King Richard II. The play is based on the true events that occurred towards the end of the 14th century. Richard II was crowned as the King of England in 1377 when he was 10 years old. Before entering inside the poem, we are going to learn about the poet William Shakespeare. He was born on 26 April 1564 in England. He was a playwright, poet, actor. Some of his famous works are Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, As You Like It, Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, 154 sonnets. He was known as the Bard of Avon, England's national poet. He was died on 23rd April 1616. His plays were classified into three sections: comedy, tragedy and historical. He was not of an age but for all time. This was said by Ben Jonson about our great poet William Shakespeare. He wrote about 37 plays, 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems and a few other verses. They have been translated into almost all the languages of the world. He wrote plays that captured the complete range of human emotions and conflicts. He was nicknamed as the Bard of Avon and was often called England's national poet. He occupies a unique position in world literature. Some of his quotes: all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and our man in his time plays many parts. Love me or hate me, both are in my favor. If you love me, I will always be in your heart. If you hate me, I will always be in your mind. We know what we are, but know not what we may be. A fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows himself to be a fool. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. These are all the quotes said by William Shakespeare. Before entering inside the poem, some of the warm-up exercises. Work with your partner and take this a short quiz to find out how well informed you are about history. Name a few wars and battles you have read about: the First World War, the Second World War, the Indo-Chinese War, the Vietnam War, the Indo-Pakistan War, the Kargil War, Battle of Panipat, Battle of Trafalgar. What's the difference between a war and a battle? War: a period of fighting between two or more countries or between opposing groups within a country. What is a battle? It's a fight between opposing armies, groups of ships, group of people, etc., especially one that is part of a larger war. Why do rulers wage wars and battles? Rulers wage wars and battles to prove military supremacy, or to establish or control trade and commerce, to plunder the wealth of other nations, to prove and establish a supremacy. Is the outcome of a war always fair? Everything is fair in love and war. So in war, the soldiers would not follow any human rules. So it is not always fair. It destroys and disorients the lives of innocent people. It makes them rootless and plunges them into abysmal poverty. Do you think rulers understand the true meaning of life in defeat or in victory? Usually, success does not end in itself. the victim would try to wage a war against the victor, and the victor would try to wage war against others. History proves this. The rulers do not understand the meaning of life. They want only victory, even if the war destroys people. Of course, Emperor Ashoka learned the true meaning of life in victory by observing how destructive the war had been. Can you name a few kings and leaders who have fallen from glory to disgrace? Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, Nero, Second Charles, Napoleon, Hitler, and Mussolini. Now we are going to learn the poem stanza wise. Now we are going to enjoy the beauty of the poem. Let's talk of graves, of worms, and epitaphs. Make dust of paper and with rainy eyes. Write sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Let's choose executors and talk of wills. Through this stanza, William Shakespeare. This poem is an extract from William Shakespeare's historic play King Richard II. The play is based on the true events that occurred towards the end of the 14th century. Second Richard was crowned as the King of England in 1377 when he was 10 years old. In 1399, he was deposed by his cousin. Oh, he is the villain, isn't it? Henry Bolingbroke. His cousin Henry Bolingbroke, who crowned himself as King Henry IV. Richard II was ousted from his royal position and sent to prison, where he died in captivity. In his play, Shakespeare captures this prominent episode of English history entirely a free-flowing verse so lyrically that he proves once again his stature as an uncrowned king of English literature. First stanza. Let's talk of graves of worms and epitaphs. In a critical situation, man never speaks of comforts. He talks about death, graves, and the writings inscribed on the tombstones in memory of the dead. When King Richard cedes political control of England to the rebellious Henry Bolingbroke, he desperately realizes the mortality of kings. Dust is compared to paper and rainy eyes to writing instruments. Here, dust is compared to a paper and rainy eyes compared to a writing instruments. Let's choose executors, who are the persons who put someone's will into effect, and talk about wills. So, in a critical situation, man never speaks of comforts. He talks about death, graves, and the writings inscribed on the tombstones in memory of the dead. When King Richard cedes political control of England to the rebellious Henry Bolingbroke, he desperately realizes the mortality of kings. Let's choose executors, who are the persons who put someone's will into effect, and talk about wills. Next stanza. And yet not so, for what can we bequeath, save our deposed bodies to the ground? Our lands, our lives, and all our Bolingbroke's, and nothing can we call our own but death. And yet, what can we pass on to anyone other than leaving our rotting bodies to the ground? What we are doing? We are leaving our rotting, that means perishable bodies, dead bodies to the ground, that's it. Our lands, our lives now belong to Bolingbroke. Everything, it belongs to Bolingbroke. Nothing is ours. And we call nothing our own except for our deaths. Except our death, everything is Bolingbroke's. Next stanza. And that small model of the barren earth, which serves as paste and cover to our bones, For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. Here, the body's flesh stands for all perishable things. Perishable things means what? Easily wasted one. Here, a model of the barren earth. The patch of earth serves as paste and covers our buried bodies. It serves as paste, that's it, and covers our buried bodies. For God's sake, let's sit on the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. We are just sitting and telling about the death of the kings, that's it. Other than that, we are not doing anything. Next stanza. How some have been deposed, some slain in war. Some haunted by the ghost, they have deposed. Some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed. All murdered for within the hollow ground. Somehow, how some were overthrown and some killed in war. Some were haunted by the ghosts of the kings they had overthrown. Everybody, they are always dying, isn't it? Someone, they were killed in war. Someone, they were haunted by the ghosts. And then someone, they were poisoned by their wives. Still others were poisoned by their wives, while others were killed in their sleep. All murdered for the hollow crown. All kings were murdered for the hollow crown. Nothing is there. The crown is empty in the middle. And this connotes that the power is not solid or strong or permanent. The power is not strong, the power is not solid, the power is not permanent one. But for that power, the king was murdered by this ways, isn't it? So, next stanza. That rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court. And there the antic sits, scoffing his estate, and grinning at his palm, allowing him a breath, a little scene. So what happened? There is always death around kings. Death, it's looking the king and then laughing at him. It is giggling at the king. For what it's giggling at him? There is always death around kings and there is no way to escape. That it induces him no way to escape. Likewise, it is sitting and scoffing him, and then it is a grimming at his palm. Death is portrayed as a court jester. Court jester means what? In Tamil we are saying as Nayandi, isn't it? So the people who are all making fun to make others to laugh, isn't it? So the death is also doing the same. Death laughs at the king's reign. What it's doing? It is laughing at the king. It is giggling at the king and mocks his great ceremonies. Death allows the king to live a little while and plays the monarch. It is giving permission to him. It is giving allowance. Next stanza. To monarchize, be feared and killed with looks, infusing him with the self and vain conceit, as if this flesh which walls about our life were brass, impregnable and humoured thus. Death allows the king to live a little while and plays the monarch. It fears him and kills with looks. Death fills him with useless pride, as if the flesh which covers his body. Death fills him with useless pride, as if the flesh which covers his body is immune to our proof against attack. It is being ridiculed. It's empty. It is filled with the flesh, that's it. So, by this stanza, William Shakespeare, he gave a deep meaning for the life of human bodies. comes at the last and within a little pin, bores through his castle wall, and farewell kings. Cover your heads and mock not flesh and blood. With solemn reverence throw away respect. Death comes at the end and with the little effort kills the body. Then goodbye, king. It's saying to the king, goodbye. So protect your heads and don't make fun of this body of flesh and blood with dignified respect. Don't show over. Protect your head and don't make any fun of this body of flesh and blood. The last stanza of this poem: tradition, form, and ceremonious duty. For you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you, feel want, taste grief, need friends, subjected thus. How can you say to me, I am a king? Throw away respect, tradition, form, and formal duties. You have mistook me all this time. You have been wrong about me all this time. There's no need to pretend that I am different than you. I feel all the same that you do. I have desires and feel sad and need friends, just like you. I am compelled to recognize human mortality. How then can you say that I am a king? So, what he is trying to say? You have mistook me all this time. You have been wrong about me all this time. There's no need to pretend that I am different than you. I feel all the same that you do. I have desires and feel sad and need friends just like you. I am compelled to recognize human mortality. How then can you say that I am a king? So this is the poem. Have you all enjoyed this poem? Yes, thank you. Now we are going to learn the glossary part, which helped us to learn this poem easily. Epitaphs, short pieces of writing inscribed on tombstones in memory of the dead. Executors, persons who put someone's terms of will into effect. Bequeath, pass on something to the next generation by means of a will. Deposed, removed from office or power. Slain, killed. Antic, someone who draws attention through silly or funny acts. Here a court jester. Scoffing, expressing mockery. Grinning, smiling wildly. Monarchize, rule, carry out the duties and functions of a ruler. Impregnable, impossible to pass through. Ceremonious, being very formal. Textual exercises. Pick out the phrase that suggests that the King Richard was sorrowful. Sorrow on the bosom of the earth. Why does the king suggest that it is now time for his will to be executed? The king thinks that his death is very near, so he suggests that it's time for his will to be executed. What is the only thing we bequeath to our descendants? We bequeath only our buried dead bodies to our descendants. What are the vanquished men left with? The vanquished men are left with death only. What does the small model refer to here? The small model refers to our body's flesh here. What does a monarch's crown symbolize? A monarch's crown symbolizes power. What marks the ruler's power and palm? Death marks the ruler's power and palm. Fill in the blanks using the words given in the box to complete the summary of the poem. King Richard II surrendered to his rebellious cousin Bolingbroke. He experienced deep distress at the horror of his circumstances. In that desperate situation, he spoke of graves, worms, epitaphs, and other things connected with death. He spoke of how people leave nothing behind and can call nothing their own, except for the small patch of barren earth where they will be buried. King Richard yielded to dejection and talked of all the different ways in which defeated kings suffer. How some had been deposed, slain in war, poisoned by their wives, and so forth. He attributed this loss of lives to death, who he personified as the jester who watches over the shoulder of every ruler, who mocks kings by allowing them to think that human flesh was like impregnable brass. However, death penetrates through the castle walls silently and unnoticed like a sharp pin, thus bidding farewell to him and all his pride forever. Finally, Richard appealed to his soldiers not to mock his mere flesh and blood by showing reverence and respect to him. He added that he too needed bread to lice, felt want, tasted grief, and needed friends. He concluded thus, urging his men not to call a king, as he was only human, just like the rest of them. Fill in the blanks with appropriate words from the box and complete the statements. Shravan never keeps his promises. His friends know that his words are hollow. The spectators died laughing at the antics of the clown. The businesswoman wished to bequeath all her riches to an orphanage after her death. The fortress was impregnable and could not be conquered by the enemies. Alexander the Great wished to conquer many lands and monarchies. Complete the passage given below with suitable words from the box. Lima was a vain and conceited woman, kept scoffing at her colleagues and went on taxing them with hard labor. Though they were ceremonious to her, she being their head, they were offended and filled with sorrow. It so happened that Lima was deposed from her high position due to a serious blunder she had committed. Lima, having lost all her reverence and glory, realized how arrogant she had been. She gave up her pride and with pomp sought an apology from everyone. She thus turned over a new leaf and bid farewell to them. From your understanding of the poem, answer the following questions briefly. What do the three words graves, worms, and epitaphs refer to? These words, graves, worms, and epitaphs, refers to death. What does the executor mentioned in the poem do? The executor will execute the will. Who is Bolingbroke? Is he a friend or foe? Bolingbroke is a cousin of Second Richard. Is a foe to Second Richard. Are all the deposed kings slain by the deposer? Yes, all the deposed kings are slain by the deposer. What does the crown of ruler stand for? The crown of ruler stands for the power of the king. What hides within the crown and laughs the king's grandeur? The hollow hides within the crown and laughs at the king's grandeur. What does flesh mean here? Flesh means body here. What are the various functions and objects given up by a defeated king? The defeated king should not expect any reverence from his followers. He throws away respect, tradition, form, and his ceremonious duty. How does the king establish that he and his subjects are equal in the end? The king lives with the bread, feels lack of something, tastes grief, and needs friends as all other subjects. So he is equal to his subjects. Bring out King Richard's feelings when he was defeated. King Richard suffered from dejection and fear of death. He understood that the victorious king would come and get his life. He was in no way different from his subjects. Now we are going to learn the appreciation questions. Read the following sets of poetic lines and answer the 4 questions that follow. Let's talk of graves of worms and epitaphs. Make dust or paper and with rainy eyes. What do these words graves, worms and epitaph stand for? These words stand for death. What figure of speech is used by the poet in the second line? The poet used metaphor in the second line. Let's choose executors and talk of wills and yet not so. For what can we bequeath save deposed bodies to the ground? Why does the king want to call the executor? He wants his executors to carry out what is mentioned in the will. According to the king, what can he pass on to the next generation? He can pass on to the next generation only the deposed body which will be buried in the ground. And that small model of the barren earth which serves as paste and cover to our bodies. What's the meaning of small model of the barren earth? It means the body's flesh which stands for all perishable things like vegetable, fruits, etc. Give the meaning of the second line. The flesh serves as a paste in our body to cover the bones to give our shape. How some have been deposed, some slain in war, some haunted by the ghost they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, some sleeping killed. How were the lives of the past kings? Some were killed in the war, some were troubled by the ghost of the kings whom they had killed. Some were poisoned by their wives, and some were killed when they were in sleep. Where do we get these references? We get these references from different plays of Shakespeare. For you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you feel want. Taste grief, need friends. Who mistook whom? The people mistook the king. Why is it a mistake? People mistook the king that he was different from others because he was respected, but the king was not different from others. He lived on food, he had grief, and he too wanted friends. So he was also an ordinary man.